As of today, I can finally say I have beaten every 2D Metroid. I finally beat Metroid 2. No, not this Metroid 2. Of course, I'm talking about the 3DS remake from Mercury Steam, Metroid Samus Returns. Let's talk about it. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I wanted to talk about my feelings and thoughts on Metroid Samus Returns. This was the final 2D Metroid game I hadn't beaten. Growing up, I played Super Metroid on the Wii U Virtual Console. That was my first 2D Metroid. Then I played Fusion on that same Virtual Console. Then I went to Zero Mission right before Dread came out. And then Dread, of course, was, I believe, I think it was my game of the year last year, actually, if it was either that or Returnal. This has been a long time coming. I've been meaning to play Metroid Samus Returns for several years now, and I finally did it. Of course, I still need to do the entire Prime series and every spinoff, but I'm pretty happy to say I've finally done all of the 2D games. And Samus Returns is really interesting for a couple of reasons. It was one of the last 3DS games of consequence, I would say. I remember when this game was announced at E3 2017. At that point, everybody was moved on to the Switch, pretty much, so I remember it being announced and everybody was like, oh, yay, Metroid! And then it was a 3DS game, so people were pretty disappointed, but also happy. I think the sales were pretty good, actually, considering its time of release on the 3DS in 2017. But it's also interesting because this is the first outsourced 2D outsourced 2D Metro game. Of course, Mercury Steam made this game, and then they later went on to make a Dread, and that's just kind of interesting. I think I believe they've said in interviews that Mercury Steam wanted to just move on to a new game or something, but Nintendo asked them to remake Metroid 2 first to kind of like test the water, see how they do, and obviously we know how they did. They did a very good job, which later led them to doing an even better job with Metroid Dread. However, Metroid Samus Returns still very much has that DNA of being a Game Boy game, and a lot of that shows. I think my biggest gripe with Metroid Samus Returns is the enemy variety. So in this game, and this is one of the more unique 2D Metroids, I think, because I mean, every game kind of has its gimmick, with the exception of, I guess, Super Metroid in the first game, right? But the gimmick in this game is you're hunting 40 Metroids. And weird little side tangent, my favorite game of all time is Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube. And in that game, you have this, like, boo counter on the screen at all times. It reminded me a lot of that, so I immediately really like that concept. When you get close to one, or if you're close to an area that has a Metroid, it starts blinking, so you know, okay, I'm going in the right direction. Having that there makes exploring SR288, or whatever the hell it's called, even more enjoyable than I think some of the other places in the Metroid series. And having that core goal of just finding all these Metroids and eliminating them all really ties this whole thing together. However, it was a Game Boy game, and I don't know if it was the same on the Game Boy. I'm assuming it probably was, but the enemy variety in this game, especially pertaining to the Metroids and the bosses in this game, is very lacking. There's like, I think, 5 types of boss in this game, but you fight 40 of them, so you're fighting the same thing a lot over and over again, just with a little bit of different terrain. Okay, you're fighting this one and there's lava now, you're fighting this one in like this grassy terrain, or you know, whatever it may be. And I think that's probably my biggest issue with Samus Returns. The other issue I have with this game, and I wasn't expecting this because I love Dread and I love countering, I think especially early on in the game, before you get a lot of your power-ups, they force you to counter a little bit too much. I feel like they went a little too far with that. Until you get the wave beam or whatever the more powerful shot is, you basically have to kill enemies with counters, and like it's fine. Countering does feel really good, but when you run into an area and there's 4 enemies and they're countering you, and there's these 2 fly enemies and then the 2 little gremlins on the ground, it gets a little. It's a bit much, I think, at times. But when the counter feels good, it feels really good. I just think that early on in the game, they kind of emphasize it a little bit too much. I guess they just wanted you to learn the mechanics, and that's fine, but I think Dread just did that whole pacing a lot better. Now, it's been years since I played the other Metroid games, aside from Dread and Zero Mission, and even Zero Mission I'm already getting a little bit foggy on, because that was like early 2021. But just the quality of life improvements made to Samus Returns, and just in terms of exploration, and I kind of mentioned this with the Metroid kind of ticker that goes off when you're near a Metroid. I don't like being lost in video games. However, I don't like being force-fed the information of where to go. And I think Mercury Steam has struck a very, very good balance with this, with both of its Metroid games now, where I'm never really lost. There's a couple times. I think it happened more in Metroid Dread, because I think the map in that game was really not good. Where, you know, I'm like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? Never to the point where like I Google it or anything, but to the point where it gets a little bit frustrating. Samus Returns, I think that happened once. But, you know, I think exploration and just the way the game is designed, and obviously that goes more, I guess, kind of to the original designers of the game, because it's a Game Boy game. I don't know how one-to-one the map is, but I assume it's pretty similar. But just the way exploring works, just the way the scan pulse works, so you can pretty much always find hidden blocks if you want to or need to. The way the tiles for the you know, what the world looks like, it's pretty well choreographed that, oh, you can blow this up usually, but also it's still discreet enough that it feels satisfying when you do it. So in terms of exploring a map with the Metroid ticker and the scan pulse and all that, I think that Samus Returns is one of the best Metroid games in terms of exploration, or at least just in terms of that, having that Metroid feeling. I never really got lost, which I think for some people that might be maybe even a negative, but for me, having that nice almost linear experience while also still having that Metroid feel, for me, that was really good. Now, I mentioned bosses a little bit earlier, but I want to go back to that really quick, because there are a few bosses in particular I want to call out. I talked about the Metroid bosses, but there was this robot boss towards the end of the game, and I'm not going to sit here and say, like, oh, I'm a pro gamer or anything, but I didn't really struggle at any other point in this game, aside from a little bit during the final boss, which is 3 phases. This robot boss was BS. I think I read online that it was originally created for this remake, so it wasn't in the original version. It wouldn't really have worked in the original version, and it's not that good. Like, it's still fun, and it was satisfying beating it, but a lot of the time that I died, it just kind of felt like BS. So there's a couple different parts to this boss fight. He has like these big motor hands or whatever, and it'll smash them down in the foreground of the screen. It's obviously like playing into that 3D aspect of the 3DS. And you're supposed to like morph ball up the sides as the cogs rotate or whatever, but I don't know. I think, and this happens to me in a lot of Metroid games, where getting in and out of the morph ball state doesn't necessarily control as responsive as I want to, so having that incorporated into a boss fight was a little frustrating. The second part of that, and going into that morph ball thing again, is another attack he does where he basically like vacuums up stuff, and he sucks you up if you get caught in it. What they want you to do is, morph ball down, use your power bombs, and damage him that way. But because it's pretty fast and you're going along with it, but you have to be very close to get the power bombs sucked into it because they explode very fast. Getting out of that morph ball state without getting sucked up was very frustrating, basically, is what I'm saying, because I feel like the controls aren't as responsive as I needed them to be. And I think this applies to most other Metroid games. I would need to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure that's always been an issue for me, is just like morphing down and then morphing back up. So I don't know. This boss fight was definitely a miss for me. It was still satisfying as hell beating it, but a little bit more frustrating than I would have liked. And then the final boss, I guess, spoiler warning if you care about Metroid spoilers, Proton Ridley was awesome. I was a little worried because I can't remember the game, but there was a Ridley boss or a final boss in one of these Metroid games recently that I played where it was kind of easy. It definitely wasn't Dread. But maybe it was Zero Mission. I'm not sure. But there was a boss fight recently in a Metroid game. I cannot remember it. Maybe you can comment down below and let me know what I'm thinking of, because maybe it's like Infamous. I don't know. That was really easy. This fight seemed pretty well balanced. I think it took me like 3 tries. Just learning the patterns of Proton Ridley. And once again, there are a couple things in here, like they have you morph ball down, but it's not like super time based. It's just like, oh, he's doing his attack, morph ball down, then get out. So it was a lot better in that regard. And this final boss was awesome. The baby Metroid, I play these games very out of order. I played Super Metroid, then Fusion, so that's right. But then I played Zero Mission, then Dread, and now I'm playing Metroid 2. But having the full picture finally come together in the plot is very nice. Obviously, I knew the plot of this game, right? You go to eradicate the Metroids, but then you save the little baby Metroid. I might be making a purchase for that Metroid amiibo, because this little baby Metroid is the GOAT. I absolutely love this, and not that Metroid has like a very on-the-nose story. I think Dread does the best job of that, of any of the games, but I like having this moment for Samus, and I like having her be like, oh, this thing's cute as f***, so I'm not gonna kill it. And then it ends up saving your ass against Proton Ridley. So, very good stuff there. And overall, I think this is probably one of the weaker Metroids, but it's still like an 8.5, right? It's still like an incredible game. I think I remember when this came out, people were giving Mercury Steam a lot of crap, and to be fair, that was maybe because of AM2R getting taken down, and that was just a sore subject for a lot of people. But I think for their first attempt at a Metroid game, and of course it's a remake, so they didn't have as much legwork to do, I think they did a really good job, and obviously we all know how Dread turned out, and that is my favorite 2D Metroid game. So overall, I think Samus Returns is fantastic. I just think I would probably put it next to Zero Mission, frankly, and I know a lot of people say Zero Mission is the best Metroid game. For me, my ranking, I guess we're doing a Metroid 2D ranking now, would probably be Dread, then Fusion was my favorite before Dread, and I want to go back and play Fusion and Super Metroid again, but then to be Super Metroid, then Zero Mission, and then this. But this is still fantastic, don't get me wrong, but I think the lack of the enemy variety and like the way that the boss fights get a little repetitive, or the boss fights, the special event fights. I can't even really call them bosses, the Metroid fights, because they're all the same, with a few exceptions. So I think that hurts this game a lot, but in terms of exploration, in terms of the story and the baby Metroid, and just the gameplay in general, I was complaining about the counter a little bit. I do think it's a fantastic addition to the series. So overall, I really enjoyed Samus Returns, but I do think it's on the lower end of the 2D Metroid spectrum. So let me know, what do you think of Metroid Samus Returns down in the comments below. How do you rank it against the other 2D Metroids? For me, as I said already, kind of on the lower end, but still a fantastic game. And I'm glad that the series is seemingly in the hands of Mercury Steam now. I don't know what else Mercury Steam is really doing right now. I know they did that Castlevania game on 3DS. I think they did some of their own stuff. But, you know, in the talk of all these acquisitions, I think Mercury Steam would probably be a pretty damn good acquisition for Nintendo if they were to acquire a studio to make one type of game. If they just want to acquire them to make Metroid, I'm okay with that. I'm okay if the future of the series is in their hands. Of course, then we'll have Prime with Retro Studios. So either way, I think Metroid is in a very good spot despite its poor sales overall, although Dread is the best-selling game. So I'm rambling at this point. I really enjoyed this game. You should play it. You should play all the 2D Metroid games. Dread especially, I think, even despite it being the 5th game, start with that. I think that's probably the best way to go. Or Super Metroid would be a great place to start. That's where I started. But with that said, let me know what you think of Metroid Samus Returns down below. Of course, if you enjoyed this review, this retro throwback review, subscribe for more reviews, 3DS content, Switch content, all of the above when it comes to Nintendo. And until next time, folks, peace.